The Orium shimmered like a cathedral to the wealthy, where even silence cost money. Amara Johnson moved between tables with the grace of someone who had learned to turn invisibility into armor. Her uniform was crisp, her eyes calm, her heart disciplined against humiliation. At a corner table sat Richard Vale, a billionaire who believed the world's pulse followed his schedule. His suit gleamed with arrogance. The golden walls reflected his ego back at him. When Amara arrived with his wine, a slight tremor in her hand delayed her by seconds. That was all it took. His smirk twisted into disgust. "You people can't even serve without fumbling," he hissed. The room froze as he spat at her feet, then directly onto her shoe. The soft splash echoed louder than any shout. Amara did not flinch, her eyes still steady, lifted and met his. In that instant, something ancient stirred in her gaze, something that saw beyond him, through him. The chandeliers flickered once, and for the first time in his life, Richard Vale looked away first. In the stillness of the service hallway, Amara leaned against the cold wall, her breath shallow but even. Her hands trembled only slightly now. She had endured worse. She had endured silence, yet something inside her shifted like the earth before an awakening. The insult had not humiliated her. It had revealed him. Behind her eyelids, she saw his face crack like glass. She whispered a short prayer, not for herself but for him. The overhead lights flickered twice, then steadied, humming with an almost sentient energy. Elise Carter burst through the kitchen doors, her face pale, her voice tight with panic. "No one says a word about what happened," she ordered, though her tone quivered. Marcus Dean looked up from his counter, knife frozen mid-slice. His eyes spoke what hers avoided, fear mixed with shame. Outside, the laughter of Richard Vale and his party resumed, echoing like a cruel soundtrack. Elise swallowed hard and turned away. The kitchen, usually alive with rhythm and heat, felt like a confessional of cowards. Richard Vale swirled his wine lazily, pretending nothing had happened. His companions chuckled at some hollow joke, but their eyes darted to him, measuring his mood. Beneath the table, his leg bounced restlessly. For a man who claimed mastery over the world, the silence that followed Amara's departure felt like a mirror he could not break. He smirked to fill the void, but the sound of his own laugh felt false, echoing too long in the gilded room. In the employee locker room, Amara changed in silence. She unpinned her name tag and placed it on the counter like an offering. The mirror above the sink flickered once, and her reflection seemed to shimmer faintly, as though the light itself bent around her. She smiled, not from pride, but from knowing that power did not always shout. Sometimes it waited in stillness, until the world forced it to speak. The night draped itself over Manhattan like a silk shroud. Richard Vale returned to his penthouse suite, glass walls framing the city as though it existed to serve him. Yet, something had shifted. The faint tremor in his hand when he poured his scotch was not from age. It was from disquiet. The memory of Amara's eyes lingered, luminous and unyielding. He told himself it was guilt, but guilt was for the powerless. Still, as he stared into the mirror above his marble bar, his reflection blinked a heartbeat too late. His pulse quickened. For the first time, Richard Vale wondered if something beyond his control was watching him. At the Orium, morning arrived with brittle quiet. Amara returned early, her uniform pressed, her expression unreadable. Elise Carter met her at the service door, guilt etched deep around her mouth. "You shouldn't have to come back," Elise whispered. Amara only replied, "I don't run from darkness. I light it." The words lingered between them, gentle yet immovable. Somewhere above, a chandelier flickered once, then steadied, as though acknowledging her truth. Marcus Dean leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching Amara polish glassware with ritual calm. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "He's the one who's not." Marcus nodded, a slow recognition passing between them. Outside, the first guests arrived, unaware of the quiet revolution brewing beneath the marble floors. The sound of Amara's breathing matched the rhythm of the jazz drifting in from the dining hall. Steady, assured, inevitable. Richard's assistant entered his office, timid, holding a report. "Sir, the video from last night," she began. He cut her off. "What video?" His tone was sharper than glass. She hesitated. "Someone recorded the incident. It's spreading." Richard froze. On his desk, his reflection stared up from the glossy surface, its mouth curled in disgust while his own stayed still. He slammed his hand down, shattering the illusion. "Find it, erase it." But as his voice echoed across the vast office, it seemed smaller than before. That evening, Amara walked home beneath soft rain. Street lights shimmered like fallen stars in puddles around her feet. A sense of peace followed her, fragile but growing. Behind her, in penthouse and boardroom, Richard's world trembled with invisible cracks, yet she felt no vengeance, only the gravity of justice unfolding on its own. As she passed a storefront window, her reflection shimmered briefly. Not just her own, but a luminous outline behind her, tall and golden. She didn't turn. She only whispered, "Let him see." Richard Vale woke before dawn, his body heavy with unrest. The city below still slept, but his mind was ablaze with fragments of memory. The look in Amara's eyes, the flicker in the chandeliers, the silence that had followed. He splashed cold water on his face, but when he looked up, the mirror did not return the same expression. It stared back at him with something older, colder, and unyielding. He whispered, "What are you?" But the reflection moved its lips a fraction later, answering in Amara's voice, "What you've made yourself." The sound was barely audible, but it shattered him like thunder. At the Orium, the day carried a strange quiet. Elise Carter reviewed her staff list with trembling hands. The restaurant felt different, charged, alive, as if something unseen had claimed it. When Amara entered, a soft breeze followed her, though no door had opened. Elise lowered her eyes. "They're talking about him," she murmured. Amara nodded once. "Let them." Her tone wasn't vindictive. It was prophetic, calm as a bell before a storm. Somewhere above, a crystal from the chandelier fell and shattered on the floor, perfectly timed with her step. Marcus Dean found Elise in the kitchen, pacing. "We can't hide this forever," he said. "The man's name is already trending. You saw what he did. If we stay silent, we're no better." Elise looked up, torn between fear and duty. "You don't understand. He has lawyers, money, power." Marcus's eyes hardened. "And she has truth." The word cut through the clatter of utensils like a blade. Elise stopped pacing. In that pause, they both realized truth had already begun its work. In his office, Richard Vale stared at multiple screens showing financial charts, news feeds, and one cursed thumbnail. "Billionaire humiliates waitress." His pulse surged. He clicked it open, only to see his own arrogance replayed from every angle. The camera captured everything. The delay, the insult, the spit, the silence. But what haunted him most wasn't his act. It was her stillness, frame by frame. Her eyes looked through him like mirrors, reflecting his soul's rot. He closed the laptop and whispered, "She's inside me now." Night returned with heavy rain. Amara walked along the riverfront after her shift, the city's hum distant and forgiving. Her mind was still. She did not wish him pain, only understanding. When she stopped to look at the dark water, her reflection appeared brighter than the streetlights above it. Ripples of gold spread outward as though the river itself recognized her. Somewhere uptown, Richard Vale screamed in his sleep, trapped in visions of the same golden light flooding his eyes. The reckoning had begun. The morning sun rose pale over the skyline. But in Richard Vale's world, the light felt like judgment. He hadn't slept. His penthouse reeked of whiskey and fear. Each mirror he passed warped his reflection into something monstrous. He muttered Amara's name under his breath, as if saying it might restore order. Instead, his voice trembled with guilt he didn't yet understand. He called his driver and demanded to be taken to the Orium. The word, sorry, formed in his mind, but he didn't know what it meant. Not yet. Elise Carter was already at the Orium when Richard arrived. The doors opened with a hiss of quiet terror. He walked in without arrogance this time, only desperation. Staff froze mid-task. Elise approached, her voice measured but firm. "Mr. Vale, the restaurant is not open yet." His eyes darted around, searching. "Where is she?" Elise didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Amara was there, waiting. In the quiet dining hall, Amara stood near the window overlooking the wet streets, the morning haze making her seem otherworldly. When Richard approached, his voice cracked. "You... How did you do this to me?" Amara turned slowly, her gaze serene but piercing. "I didn't do anything," she said. "You saw yourself for the first time." Richard stepped closer, trembling. "You cursed me." Amara shook her head. "No, Richard Vale, you cursed yourself." Her words fell like stones into still water, and in their echoes, he felt his soul unravel. Richard's voice broke. "Why can't I stop seeing you? In mirrors, in dreams, everywhere." Amara stepped closer, her presence calm yet immense. "Because you're finally seeing what you've hidden. Every cruelty leaves a shadow. Every shadow must face light." The room fell, utterly silent. Even the hum of the refrigeration unit faded. Richard dropped to his knees. For a moment, the billionaire looked small, human, and frightened. Amara did not touch him. She only looked down with compassion that burned more than anger ever could. As Richard wept silently, the chandeliers above flickered once more. Their golden glow softened into silver light that wrapped the room like forgiveness. Amara took a breath, her voice quiet but resonant. Change doesn't begin with apology. It begins with truth. Then she turned and walked toward the back hallway, each step deliberate, her reflection gliding beside her in the glass walls like a second soul. Richard stayed kneeling long after she disappeared, staring at the floor where her shadow had been. The world felt unbearably still, and for the first time in his life, he prayed. By the next morning, the story had conquered the internet. The Orium incident trended across every platform. Clips replayed in endless loops. Richard Vale's insult, Amara's stillness, the moment of silence that followed. Reporters camped outside his building, flashing cameras at every window. Inside, Richard watched the footage again and again, each replay stripping away another layer of denial. The empire he'd built on dominance and image was collapsing under the weight of his own reflection. For the first time, he realized power could be a prison. At the Orium, the staff gathered quietly before opening hours. Whispers filled the air, some fearful, some emboldened. Marcus Dean leaned against a counter, arms crossed, his eyes finding Amara's. "Hill, come undone now," he said softly. Amara shook her head. "He's already undone. Now he must rebuild." Her voice carried no hatred, only truth. The others listened, moved by the calm certainty of someone who understood justice, not as revenge but as light piercing the dark. Elise Carter sat in her small office, scrolling through online headlines. Her heart pounded with shame. Every article reminded her of her silence that night, her choice to protect her job instead of a woman's dignity. She looked at her reflection in the darkened monitor and saw complicity staring back. When Amara knocked gently at the door, Elise's voice broke. "I should have spoken. I'm sorry." Amara smiled faintly. "Then start now." It was not condemnation. It was release. The boardroom of Vale Technologies was silent, except for the hum of screens. Richard sat at the long table's head, staring blankly at his executives. They avoided his eyes. "This company," one began carefully, "cannot survive your image." Richard didn't argue. The arrogance that once defined him had evaporated. "Then let it fall," he said quietly. The words shocked them all, but he meant it. For the first time, he didn't crave control, only clarity. By evening, Richard walked through the rain-soaked streets unnoticed, stripped of fame and pride. His company had voted him out. His name was synonymous with disgrace. Yet beneath the ache of humiliation, there was something cleansing. He stopped near the Aureum, staring through its glowing windows. Inside, Amara was laughing softly with Marcus and Elise. The sight pierced him, not with envy, but with yearning for the peace he'd never known. He whispered to the rain, "Teach me how to be human again." Weeks passed in quiet turbulence. Richard Vale disappeared from public view. The news cycle moved on, but whispers about his collapse lingered like the echo of a moral earthquake. Amara continued working at the Aureum, her presence calmer, her smile unforced. Yet she felt something unresolved, as though the story's circle had not fully closed. In another part of the city, Richard spent his mornings volunteering endlessly at a shelter. Hands once manicured, now blistered by humility. He had not seen her since that day, but he felt her silence shaping him. Amara sat alone in the employee break room during a lull between dinner services. The world outside hummed with traffic and neon. Her hands rested on her apron, eyes half closed. She thought about forgiveness, not as a gift to another, but as a release from burden. The faint vibration in the air told her what she already sensed. Richard would return. She exhaled, neither fearful nor eager. Justice had already done its work. What remained was grace. The next morning, Richard stood outside the Aureum's entrance, hesitant. Gone were the tailored suits, the arrogance, the entourage. He wore humility like a borrowed coat. When the doors opened, Elise Carter saw him first. Her eyes widened, not with anger, but astonishment. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. Richard nodded. "I know, but I have to be." She didn't stop him. The weight in his voice carried something real, something earned. When Amara appeared from the hallway, she paused upon seeing him. The world seemed to hold its breath. Richard spoke first, voice trembling. "I came to apologize." Amara studied him quietly, sensing sincerity woven through the cracks of his guilt. "You don't owe me words," she said softly. "Only truth." Richard lowered his gaze. "You showed me the mirror I refused to see." Amara nodded slowly. "Then you're beginning." Her voice carried warmth that felt like sunrise after storm. Amara's eyes softened. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," she said. "It's remembering without chains." Richard nodded, tears glistening at the edges of his eyes. "Then let me remember you that way." She reached out, not to touch, but to bless the space between them. For an instant, the air shimmered with golden dust, like sunlight refracted through water. Richard felt warmth seep into his chest where shame had lived. Amara smiled faintly, and the glow faded. The silence that followed was not empty. It was whole. Months drifted by like gentle tides. The scandal faded, replaced by newer stories of greed and spectacle. But within those forgotten spaces of the city, quiet transformations took root. Amara no longer worked at the Aureum. She had joined a community shelter where every meal fed dignity as much as hunger. Each morning, she opened the doors before sunrise, her heart unburdened. Somewhere across the city, Richard Vale lived a life of humility. His fortune gone, but his peace newly born. Both carried the same silence, the silence that follows understanding. Elise Carter visited the shelter one afternoon, carrying a box of donated supplies. Her eyes widened when she saw Amara greeting guests with laughter and warmth. "You built something beautiful," Elise said softly. Amara smiled. It was already here. It just needed light. The two women embraced, not as manager and employee, but as equals who had walked through darkness together. For Elise, the hug felt like penance made flesh. Later that week, Marcus Dean arrived after finishing his shift at the Orium. He brought trays of leftover pastries and a quiet grin. "Still saving the world, I see," he teased. Amara laughed, shaking her head. "No, just feeding it." He placed the trays down, watching her organize volunteers with effortless calm. Her presence seemed to make the air itself gentler. Marcus admired her strength. Not the loud kind that demands attention, but the still kind that rebuilds worlds. One rainy afternoon, Richard Vale walked through the shelter's open doors. He didn't plan it. It was as if the city itself guided his steps. He stood at the entrance, drenched but unashamed, holding a small donation envelope. When Amara looked up and saw him, neither spoke. She only gestured toward a table of clean dishes and empty chairs. "Help me," she said simply. Richard nodded, and he did. As evening fell, the shelter quieted. Amara and Richard worked side by side in silence, washing the last of the dishes. She handed him a towel. He dried each plate slowly, reverently, as though cleansing pieces of his past. When they finished, she turned toward the window where the rain had stopped. Silver moonlight pooled across the floor, soft and forgiving. Richard whispered, "Thank you." Amara didn't reply. She simply met his eyes. And in that gaze lived everything words could not carry: pain, understanding, forgiveness, and the fragile beauty of being human again.